Hello, this is the Global News podcast from the BBC World Service, with reports and analysis from across the world. The latest news 7 days a week. BBC World Service podcasts are supported by advertising.
This is the Global News podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Alex Ritson, and in the early hours of Tuesday, the 26th of November, these are our main stories. A court in Argentina has sentenced 2 Catholic priests to prison for sexually abusing children at a school for the deaf. The official committee investigating drugs in sport calls for Russia to be banned from all international competitions. Leaders in France and South Africa have announced plans to curb violence against women. Also in this podcast, a new report by the World Meteorological Society has said greenhouse gas levels have risen yet again. And a village in Nigeria gets fed up with its name.
One man said he'd put off meeting his girlfriend's parents because he was too embarrassed to tell them where he was from.
Why people in Area of Idiots were ready for a change. In a case that has made headlines across Argentina, 2 Catholic priests have been sentenced to prison for sexually abusing deaf children. A court gave them each more than 40 years behind bars.
Condenar a Horacio Hugo Corbacho Blanc a la pena.
The 2 clerics, Horacio Corbacho and Nicola Corradi, were found guilty of raping children over a 12-year period at the school. About 10 of their victims were in court for sentencing. I spoke to Veronica Smink of BBC Mundo.
It's hard to imagine a worse scenario. We're talking about children who not only were children, but also, they couldn't communicate. It was just so terrible for them. The system, that they were teaching them, the system for the deaf, didn't allow sign language. So the smaller children couldn't communicate with their parents at all. There have been horrible stories coming out from the victims, some saying that, they were abused at night and that these priests had them take their hearing aids off, so they couldn't hear the children scream. Just horrific stories.
Also, one of the priests, Nicola Corradi, had previously been accused of similar offences at a school in Italy.
That's right. 10 years back, there were victims from the Provolo Institute in Verona, the original Provolo Institute. And Nicola Corradi was amongst a group of priests accused of abuses there. The Italian justice couldn't do anything about it because the case expired. Too much time had passed since the accusations came forward. But some of these victims did tell the Vatican. One of them even met Pope Francis personally and gave him a letter, including the names of these priests, Nicola Corradi being one of them. Yet the Vatican reacted very late. They only sent out an investigation in 2017, 1 year after the Argentine authorities had already closed the institute in the province of Mendoza in Argentina.
Of course, Pope Francis is from Argentina, but we've heard all too many of this kind of case connected with the Catholic Church around the world. Where does this leave the reputation of the Catholic Church in Argentina?
A lot of people here are very, very disappointed with how the Vatican has acted, and they personally accuse Pope Francis of not listening to the victims of the Italian Institute. They say all of this could have been prevented. Let's also remember that it's not only the case of this institute in Mendoza, but this priest, Nicola Corradi, before arriving at this institute, had also directed another institute in Buenos Aires province, and the Argentine authorities are also investigating abuses he and others committed there. So this case doesn't even end there. They're also very disappointed with Pope Francis having visited Chile a few years back and not visiting the victims in Mendoza and not even mentioning them, not one mention of them.
Veronica Smink from BBC Mundo. The official committee investigating drugs in sport has called for Russia to be banned from all international competitions for 4 years. The recommendation by the World Anti-Doping Agency comes after it found out that Russian officials had falsified laboratory data given to investigators. The ban would see next year's Olympics taking place without Russia. Our sports news correspondent Alex Capstick told me more.
Well, this all relates to that big scandal which was uncovered, the first reports of it in 2015, and eventually it led to allegations of a state-sponsored and systematic doping conspiracy in Russia. Russia was banned from various sports. It missed out on the Pyeongchang 2018 Olympic Games. But then in September last year, WADA lifted its own ban on its anti-doping program, but there were conditions, and one of the conditions was that they should hand over electronic data. This is drug testing data from a Moscow laboratory which had been kept under lock and key. Now, they eventually got hold of that data in January this year, and experts have been analysing it, and they found it, or some of it, not to be authentic. In effect, what they have discovered is that Russian officials have been covering up positive tests, which is what they were trying to do in that scandal between 2012 and 2015. So they have broken the conditions, one of the conditions that was laid down for the lifting of the ban, and that's why this independent panel has called for Russia or USADA to be made non-compliant, and the sanctions for that, they're saying, should be a 4-year ban, and a 4-year ban in this case from all major sporting events.
So what are the chances of such a ban being implemented?
Well, this will be up for discussion on December the 9th when WADA's leadership, its executive committee led by Sir Craig Reedy, who is the outgoing president of WADA, they'll meet to discuss this issue. They will come to a decision. WADA is divided between sporting representatives from the IOC and government representatives. The IOC has in the past been quite reluctant to ban Russia as a nation. Thomas Bach, the IOC president, has always talked about protecting clean athletes. So there may be a bit of resistance to a ban, but it would be unusual, unlikely, I think, for WADA to reject this recommendation. More likely they'll accept it, and then it's likely that Russia will appeal that decision and it will go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So some way to go yet to reach a conclusion in this, but it doesn't look good for Russia as it stands, and another step towards them not being allowed to take part in these major sporting events.
Alex Capstick. The figures are staggering. 1/3 of all women and girls experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. Half of all women killed in the world die at the hands of their partners or families. The United Nations released these statistics on Monday to coincide with the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. In France, where over the weekend thousands of women demonstrated against gender-based violence, the government has proposed a raft of policies intended to prevent domestic abuse. Our correspondent in Paris, Lucy Williamson, sent this report.
A report by the Justice Ministry last month found that almost half of those killed by their partners had previously filed a report with the police, but that 80% of the complaints did not lead to prosecution. Today, after 2 months of government consultations, the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, responded.
A proposal will enter into Parliament in January 2020 for the automatic suspension of parental authority for any partner who kills their companion, and the option of judicial restrictions to parental authority for violent partners.
The government also said it'll create 1,000 extra spaces in emergency shelters, train police officers in how to assess complaints, and has suggested that doctors will be able to break patient confidentiality in cases of domestic violence if they think it would save lives. It's also said it will co-fund new care centres in each region of France for the perpetrators themselves. The Rosati home is currently one of very few centres to help violent partners to change. The men who stay here for the 4-week programme have mostly been convicted of domestic violence in some form. Money for schemes like this is controversial, but the home's director, Benoît Durieux,